on our special session for investigators.
Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. It's my first time at KCRS, and I know many of you because you're in my grants portfolio. So I'm here to really get to the nitty-gritty about how you can be successful writing in NCI or NIH grants. Two disclaimers. One is that I normally do this talk in an hour, so I'm either going to talk really fast, or I might go over. So we're just going to. He's going to keep me honest though, because he told me he had to leave. Secondly. I think this talk originally started because of Tony and I's endless discussions, Maxine, about Lebanese cuisine and the fact that I'm supposed to be more entertaining than his favorite. So we're just going to leave it at that. I have disclosures, only one. I'm a Fed, so no company disclosures. Secondly, there's going to be a lot of acronyms in my talk because it's the only way I can get through it in a reasonable amount of time, but I'll explain the important ones to you. But here's a partial list. It's going to be posted. You can go back to it at any time. So, in my opinion, there's three people everybody who wants to write a grant at NIH needs to know. We're going to talk about all three. The first one is your scientific review officer. They are the people who set up, run the study sections, they write all the summary statements, they post the summary statements and your scores online. I have no control over any of that. The way I interact with the SROs is that I can listen into the study sections only where I have grants assigned. And also sometimes the ones that I have an ongoing relationship with, the ones where my grants land in their study section a lot, they often will come to me if they need extra expertise. So if you contact me, one of the things I'm going to ask you is, have you served on a study section and are you interested? Nothing will teach you more about writing grants than serving on a study section. There is a way for young investigators to volunteer. Do it. You'll learn so much. It's really important. The second person is me. I'm your program director. I have actually spent my entire career at NCI. I thought I was coming in for 2 years to do a postdoc. 33 years, I'm still here. I worked 23 years of that in an intramural lab at NCI, and I'm actually a card-carrying chemist, although I don't do that anymore. I'm only biology. And then about 12 years ago, I switched to the extramural world where I am now. And so every program director has scientific expertise. We know the grants process really well. We also have institutional knowledge. For me, it's that 33 years of being here. And we have a lot of other experience as well. So for instance, Don and I actually collaborated when I was intramural. And I would say that Marston Linehan is the person who both introduced me and induced my interest in kidney cancer because of our collaboration. So we're here, and my job here is as your advocate. I represent you to the officials at NCI. I help you work through the processes at NCI. I'm also there to mentor you on grant writing. Okay, I'm your advocate. Get to know me. It's important. And the third person, they're way more important than me. These are the grant management people because they are the ones who actually give the money. Okay, they're mostly going to deal with your business person. But you also, if you get queries from a grants management person, be responsive, because until you meet all their criteria, because they are fiduciarily responsible for everything they give out, you're not going to get your grant if you don't meet their criteria. Okay, they're really important to know. Another thing, they only serve your institution for 1 year and then they move to other institutions. So there is not any way that they can get so well enmeshed in your university that there could be some biases that slips in. So they switch every year. Okay, so let's talk about key steps. There's really 4 steps to the whole process. The first is your application development. The second is receipt and assignment. That's ARA when it goes to the study section. The third is peer review and funding outcomes. And then the fourth is when you get an award, it's the negotiation, the issuance, the monitoring, and the compliance with all the federal regulations. There's a whole lot of information on our websites for every one of you at NIH and NCI. They have their own YouTube channel. They have recorded seminars. They have endless web pages that they're constantly revising. They explain it to you. They do so much They also hold courses. So do yourself a favor, at least use those 3 bottom URLs and find out about the grants process. Okay, it'll really do you well. The other thing that's really important though, is you need to understand the culture of any organization that you're sending your grant applications to. This is true of NCI or NIH or DOD or anybody else. And one thing you should know is that at NIH, biology is king. If you are developing new technology or you're using chemistry or physics, because there's a physical sciences oncology awards at this point, you still have to have a really strong biologic reason for why you're pursuing your research. Not all organizations are this way. So you really need to understand the culture of any organization that you're writing grants to. And you need to understand some of the, how it's organized. So I've highlighted the different divisions for NCI on this slide, and the 4 that are surrounded in red, those are the ones that actually give out grants. Cancer prevention is focused on cancer prevention. Cancer biology is more basic research. Cancer control and population sciences is actually the people who run the SEER program. They do smoking cessation, they do survivor outcomes, they work with the FDA and do things like the 5-a-day program. And then there's DCTD, or the Division of Cancer Treatment and Diagnosis. That's my division. And within that division, I am in the cancer diagnosis program. And my actual branch that I'm in is the diagnostic biomarkers and technology. So I have, sort of 2 focuses in my grant portfolio. One is technology development, and one is GU cancers. In addition to that, I also am a lead reviewer for CTEP, the Clinical Trials Program. And I actually, if you have a biomarker assay that's in an early or late stage NCI-sponsored trial, depending on what it is, I could be your biomarker reviewer. Okay. Okay. So we understand the process. We know our organization. The next thing you need to do is identify a NOFO, which is the new phrase. We used to call it an FOA. We're now calling it a NOFO as of 2 months ago, which is a notice of funding opportunity. And that's because they changed the acronym so we would be consistent throughout the government. Whatever, it's just an acronym. There's the website, there's funding opportunities. There's 2 basic flavors. One is an RFA. It only gives you an impact score, does not give you a percentile. It does not have a pay line. All of the grants are individually selected by the senior leadership. And then there's a PA or PA. And those have pay lines, goes through the normal motions. You can sign up for a weekly listserv that will drop all of the new and changes to any funding opportunities every single week. Sign up for it. It drops into my mail every Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock. It'll really provide you with an ongoing understanding of what topics are of interest to the NCI. Okay. You have a NOFO, you know what you're going to apply for. The next thing to do is you have to write your application. So you need to know that we're using Forms G. In January, we're going to switch to Forms F. Those might do all the changes. And there are downloadable guides that you can use, and everything has a due date. You need to know what they are, but don't ask your program officer what the deadlines are, because there's just too many other things I have to keep track of. I don't know. I'll just send you to a website. Okay, but there is one form every time you submit an application that you really, really, really need to fill out. It is optional, but if you don't fill it out, you are shooting yourself in the foot, and it's called the PHS assignment request form. Why? This is where you identify what study section you think your application needs to go to. The second thing it does is it gives you 5 areas of scientific expertise that are required to properly review your application. Remember, study sections are a group of, the biggest is maybe 40 people. And when your grant comes in, they try to have 3 people who have the expertise that you require. Okay, everybody else is a generalist because they have to cover all the other topics that that study section is using. So you need to identify exactly what you need for your application in order to make sure that you have the expertise there. If you don't do that, you can't really complain later on that you didn't have the right expertise. Okay, really, really important. Okay, also, if you have trouble submitting your application or your business office does, please use the help desk's information that's available to you, because as stupid as it seems as a program director, I don't get to see the screens that you do when you submit your application. I don't know what they look like. I have no way of helping you. So there are lots of places you can go to for help. And please use them because, again, it's Greek to me. I don't see them. And the other thing is that at the bottom of every NOFO, there is a list of scientific representatives. If you have a new funding opportunity, those scientists that are listed are the people who wrote it and got it passed through the leadership in order for it to be sent out. So they are the experts on each one of these NOFOs. They know exactly what they're looking for and where the points of interest that the organization has. So go to them and ask them the question, is this reasonable for my application? You know, what are they really interested in? Reach out to them first before you reach out to me. Okay. The next is receipt, referral, and review. You and I both go pretty quiet at that point. The only way that I interact during review is that I get to listen in on study sections that I have grants assigned to. I can't speak, I can't add anything, I can't change anything. All I am a silent listener. And I don't get any information that you don't have before you get it. I don't get your scores earlier. I don't get your summary statements earlier. The only thing I can do during this time is listen. So if you get your score, I'll have that information too, but I will not talk to you about the review until we have a summary statement. Okay, so now that that's happened, let's talk about what we do. One, I know it feels really personal and it's really emotional when you get a bad review when you aren't in the fundable range. I know that the study sections are, for one, they're voluntary organizations. So everyone who gets there, they get no money for reviewing your grants. 99.9% of the people who participate actively want to help the NIH identify the best research that the applicants have submitted. They are not trying to ruin your career, destroy your life, even when it feels that way. So the most important thing you need to do is talk to your program director, but please don't call me cold, because I have 1,600 grants and applications in my portfolio at any given time. I'd love to tell you that I have them all memorized. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't. And more than that, even if I've read them recently, I want to go back and I want to reread the application. I want to read the summary statement. I want to think about what I heard if I was able to listen to it so that I can actually be helpful to you when you call. The other thing is that you also should have reviewed your summary statement, but you should also have reviewed it with your team, because most of us don't submit one PI applications anymore. You need their insight. You need to figure out what they think is going on. And you need to come to me with an open mind. Don't call me, send me an email, we'll make an appointment. I generally book 45 minutes for these calls. It can be longer if I think it's going to be more complex. I will send you a list probably of 3 to 4 weeks of my availabilities and say, please send me 2, 3, or 4 options when you're available. Please don't send me one back. Send me 2 or 3, because you're not the only person I'm talking to at this time. And I'd hate for you to respond back to me and go, well, you know, you were second, so that time slot's already changed, and then we have to start the process over again. Okay? Please give me some options. And come to me with an open mind, because if you have already decided everything is wrong, nothing was right, and there's nothing you need to do to improve your grant, you're going to fail again. Because the truth is that unless you get a scorable, a fundable score on your summary statement and on your application, it's not going to change. Okay, so the only thing you can do is decide that this application, this idea is no good, which I don't really believe if you've only submitted it once. or it was triaged and it doesn't seem to matter. But even some of those, the summary statements really go into depth about what they think the issue is. Let's talk about those either. Also, you need to start revising as soon, and you need to, think about which are the things that you think are the most important when we talk. Yeah, I'm not going to even talk about what you don't need to do because it's pretty clear. So some examples of effective responses. Accept that their critiques are in the spirit of helping you. I tell people who are really upset or who have a tendency to take it personally is to, go in all in and write all of the terrible things about what this critique was, blah, 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 blah. Write it all out, express all your emotion, get it all out there. And then find a way to release it back to the universe. Burn it, rip it up into shreds and throw it in the trash. Bang the microphone so you deafen everybody in the room and just release all that bad energy back, because if we don't come together as an open mind, and if you aren't willing to revise and really think about what they've said, you're wasting your time to try again, okay? So find a way to get rid of all that emotion. And here's the other thing. You get an extra page when you resubmit, and that page should be for 2 or 3 of the most critical changes that people really wanted to see. And you should respond to them on that introduction page. And you also need to thank the reviewers for their review. You don't have to respond to everything in that page. In fact, that's a bad thing. What you do for the rest is you put like a line in the margin to show where you've changed your application, or you italicize it, or whatever. Just make it easy for them. Because what they'll get is they'll get your new application and the old summary statement. And they have to decide if you have actually been responsive. And then, let's go. Let's take it back again. Okay, really? Let's start now. And start now applying now. Start applying now. And allow enough time for resubmissions. Ladies, I'm going to talk to you personally for a minute. As a group, we wait too long. The guys down the hall, they've written 3 grants before you put your first application in. They come in with less preliminary data. Do it now. Take a chance. You need to know what people think about your ideas. Submit it right now, okay? Take the chance. It's a learning experience. It will give you experience in how to respond to these things. Please start earlier. I hate it when it's a woman who is coming up for tenure and her first application comes in a year before she's going to get a tenure decision and she doesn't have any funding. It's a terrible way to do it. Start early, keep at it. You will be successful. So let me just talk about this for a minute. The funding on an 01 grant is about 15%. If you revise and resubmit, that percentage goes to 35. Of all the people in my portfolio that are funded, 99% of them have had a conversation with me. So talk with the program director, let's work on it together, and let's get it done. That's what I'm here for. Okay, and then the last part is funding, how you get the money. You really have to meet all the criteria of the grants management people. There's other things that you can do, like if there's something in your summary statement about your data management or your human subjects or your animal, or you have a foreign component, we have to do with all of that, you and I together, before you get your funding. So we're going to start working on that if you're in the fundable range. Also, there is an exception process. It's very, very, very narrow. It's just a couple percentage beyond your the funding range. And in my division especially, it's only 2 or 3%, and there's no exceptions. Also, start dates are a request. It's not the start date. So if you are going to ask for your start date to be between October 1st and December 1st, you're going to get funded December 1st. The government ends its fiscal year September 30th, and between October 1st and November 30th, that's when they do all their audits and everything at the grants management area. So they don't issue any grants till after December 1st. And also we usually don't have a budget, so we don't have pay lines. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I only have 10 seconds left. and I am open for your questions. Thank you. Yes. Yes, I can talk to you about that because I have several in my portfolio. So there's two flavors. One is just kind of a lab manager R50, and the other one is for somebody who runs like a core facility. They're very, 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 very competitive. So if you have an R50 that gets more than a couple of twos, you know, usually the fundable impact score is between 10, which is when you get all ones, and something less than 20. And I would love to tell you I get a part to play in which ones get selected, but I don't. It's handled at an upper level of the institute, and they choose them all, even though they're in my portfolio. Yes.
Wasn't there a recent release for R50s for people who are like heavily involved in the cooperative groups?
Yes.
And like
There's
the
like a clinical
NCI,
one.
There's like a clinical one that's
Yes.
not,
That's new.
you know, that's a new
Mhm.
entity.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I have a feeling it's going to be just as competitive.
yeah, I'm certain. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply, because people are really successful with it. So by all means, what is it going to cost you to accept an application? Go ahead and try, right? It'll help you in your lab because you'll have a lieutenant that's paid for, or Josh has somebody in the Corps that he's trying to get paid. There's other people that I know. I have a bunch in my portfolio, and about half of them have gotten paid. So again, you can't win if you don't try. Okay.
From the online audience, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this process, the forms, etc., the same for both NIH and ARPA?
No, no. Well, maybe. Because officially, ARPA-H is going to be part of NIH. So in fact, it may. What I don't know is if that's what they've decided. I know DARPA has a different, and the DoD has a different form that you guys use, so.
Can you
maybe.
explain what that is?
ARPA-H. Okay, so the Defense Department for about. Okay, but do you want me to just give you my 2 cents?
And answer.
Okay, so DARPA was a Defense Department, mostly contracts that they use to develop new technologies. And so ARPA-H is kind of on the same thing, where they're trying to develop new technologies, new processes that will escalate or accelerate our progress for all kinds of health. And it's a new thing. It was just funded last year, and I'm sure they're just working out all their processes.
I have a question over here. This side.
Yes.
So I'm old enough and I've submitted hundreds of grants over the years, so I have a particular question on strategy.
Okay.
When you get a grant that does not make it through triage, you get the critiques back, but the critiques do not reflect the discussion of the study section.
Correct.
Because they never make it that far.
Right.
So they're difficult to sort of get a consensus out of, because the consensus discussion was never had.
Right.
So what do you recommend in those circumstances? I know it's a difficult question to answer, but is that like, if you didn't make it through triage, you know, you're fighting an uphill battle, because most of the time you can't make it steep enough to get up there. But what do you think?
You can't make it with your first resubmission generally, but that doesn't mean you can't get it over the finish line.
No.
It might take you 2 revisions, but certainly what we need to do is sit down and really look at what your reviewer said and see if there is a common theme, because something that has a common theme is a way easier thing to fix than something that's just all over the board. And the advantage you get when something's talked about is you not only get the critiques, which are written in advance and they generally are not revised, but you also get that resume, which is at the top of page 2.
Yeah.
You don't get that with something that's triaged, but it's still worth having the conversation with me, because one, I can tell you, is this really an area of interest? Is it that it went to the wrong study section? Is it that you didn't list your scientific expertise properly? And what are the issues that are fixable? How can we approach it differently? You sometimes need that. And I would say that that is irregardless of how experienced you are, things change. And so, yeah, I do think it's worth having the conversation. I will say that it's generally an exceptional application that's revised and then funded the next time when it was triaged. It has happened. In my 12 years as an extramural person in my own portfolio, I've probably seen it less than half a dozen times, but it has happened. What really happens usually is that it goes from being triaged to, something in the mid 20s or low 30s. And then that's really fixable to get over the line.
But fixable with a brand new grant, or you
With
can
a brand new grant, yeah.
with a brand new, different title, different grant?
No,
really?
it doesn't even have to change the title. It's just a new grant the second time it comes in. You don't get that extra introduction page. You put it in as a new submission.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so yes, it takes longer with something that's triaged, but that doesn't mean it's hopeless. What really matters is how important do you think this line of research is?
Yeah, right.
Right? Is it worth continuing, or do you want to move on to something else? It's a personal decision, but we should still have a conversation about that. Josh.
Tanya, I just want to amplify what you said about the resubmission, about the one-page response to reviewers. It is so critical, and how you phrase that and approach it in a kind fashion. My last run on the Conch study section, I got 8 RO1s to review. That's a lot of time that sunk into that.
Yeah.
So it's.
And you get nothing but travel costs. I mean, people who.
You got $100, Tony? Wow.
He was doing spores. It's a little bit more
Tony. I would
complex.
give-
I'm sorry.
See, I would give
Yeah.
$100. I'll give you money now.
The people I know that serve on these, so GU people that I know that serve on these, Josh is on Conch, Felix Fang and Fu Tran is on MCDC, which used to be CBSS. So, we have major people in the field all over the place, and they're up on the highest things, and they are promoting their own science, but you have to write a good application.
The one thing that I would add to that is that also use a little bit of that space that you've got, because when your grants resubmitted, it often does not go to the same reviewers. So taking a little bit of that space and being able to say, here's what they loved about me on the first submission. And then here's the things that they were most concerned about, not everything, the most concerning things. And here's how I've addressed those very
Right.
important questions, because that is something that we do review upon is this responsive to critiques?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
other
It's
things
an
will
extra
really-
criterion.
Yeah, it'll really push you in a positive direction
Mhm.
to approach that rebuttal letter.
Yes,
The other
Tony.
thing, when I say it depends in part on the program officer, not to get the grant, but in guidance, help, etc. Sometimes, with the program officer, whether it's NCI, whether it's DOD, etc., you get a message that, just irregular. I mean, a message, what happens, an automatic message, etc. And there is no, even when you ask for a phone call, you see that, just apply and we'll see. It's different. There is no guidance. So how much the program officer, matter one, and if there are things that you can push the program officer to do, if you have a program officer that just is,
Is not
there to
responsive.
push papers. And that could happen, like everything in life.
Yeah. People tell me I'm unique. I don't understand that, because to me, being an advocate for my grantees and actually building relationships with you guys, it's one of the best things about my job. It's where I get my hit for mentoring since I've left the lab, because it was one of my favorite things when I was in the lab. And so I don't understand the disconnect between people wanting to talk to you, because otherwise I'd just be sitting in my office, Really, I like the human interaction, mostly because we're still not back completely from COVID. But yes, so what I would say, Tony, is that if you've tried several times and you're not getting a response, you can always escalate by going to their branch chief. It's hard, and I would do it rarely. I would try and just to build relationships, the people who speak to me, I build relationships with. Josh knows this, Tony knows this, Raina knows this, Maxine knows this. So, and I'm always looking to meet new people. If you're in my portfolio, you're one of my folks, and that's how I'm going to treat you. And we can work together on just about anything. I help with, figuring out study sections. I, figure out scientific expertise. We talk about, bad reviews and good reviews, but that's what we do. Other questions? I haven't heard from anybody who's just starting out. Does everybody know about the K99R00 for postdocs? That grant application process, you get 3 years of postdoc support and then you get 2 years as a first faculty member. So those of you who are going into academics, you should be thinking about that and applying. It goes to the training program. They have really good folks. You should talk to them. But it will move you to the top of any list because you're coming with money. So young folks should really think about that. Yes.
Could I maybe build on that question? Tony and I, and more so Tony, have this really amazing cadre of postdoctoral fellows, usually international graduates who are transitioning to oftentimes residency positions here in the US. Are there grant mechanisms within your portfolio that are suitable for those individuals?
I would have to look. There probably are, because I think that there are early grants that allow for clinical trials, and that's really what they're going to be focusing on, would be my guess. But if they're just doing research, they could also do that. The other thing is the ESI status, early stage investigator, that for PhDs is 10 years from your terminal degree. For medical folks, it's 10 years from your residency.
Okay.
And so that gives you, at the NCI, it gives you an extra, it's 12 for new investigators are experienced, and I think it's 16 or 17 for ESIs. That's a huge difference. And the other thing about ESIs, if you're getting an R01 and you fall within the normal pay line, what we do is we transfer that or transition it to what's an R35, and you actually get 2 extra years of funding. There's a couple of things you have to do during your 4th year, but generally it's successful. So you'll get 7 years instead of 5 on your first R01. So you should be aware of all these programs. This is why get onto that listserv that I down there, so you can look at the funding opportunities, talk to somebody. If your mentor has a program director they have a relationship with, they should be able to introduce you. I will talk to anybody who has GU interests. I don't have it on here, I'm sorry. You can get me at the NCI by doing Tawnya.McKee@nih.gov. It will get to me. That's all you have to do.
And sorry to separate on this question, but outside of that K99R00 mechanism for somebody who's doing a transition within their career, again, this model that I sort of borrowed from Tony is usually we'll have a postdoctoral fellow come and do research with us, clinical research for a 3-year span. If they're within that first year, right, is there an opportunity for them to get funding to fund the second 2 years? And if so, what would you recommend?
So there are a bunch of training grants. I'm not as familiar with those because they aren't in my portfolio. So I would say you need to look at the research training. They have a whole separate FOAs. They're really great folks. I know several of them really well. I would have sent you to somebody in particular, but she retired this year. So, but yeah, there's lots of opportunities. Yes. Not for training grants. Absolutely not. Yeah, I don't think you do. I don't think you do. You can, I could be wrong on that. Again, I don't have them in my portfolio. It's very hard for me to keep up on everything. It will tell you clearly if you can't. I know that there are other things that foreign postdocs can do. I know there's NATO fellowships that you can get. Yeah, I would have to double check that though. Yes.
There is one condition which needs to be fulfilled for application for K99 and RO00, and that is a permanent residency.
Yeah, that's true for the
K99.
K99. Yes.
K99 maybe no, but for the rest, yes.
Yes, that's true, because you're transitioning to an R00 and yeah.
You cannot do that on visa, that's the point.
Right. But then once you are in the university, you do not have to be a permanent resident, because again, the grant goes to the institution, not to the person. And so, that is helpful. That's why I don't think that they are actually require citizenship or permanent residency, because it actually goes to the institution. Other questions? Going once, I have 24 seconds. Okay, you know how to reach me. don't hesitate to reach out. If I don't answer you in a week, it's not because I hate you and I'm ignoring you. It's usually because my email is inundated, and even my friends have to hit me a couple times, sometimes, because I get really busy. So thanks again for the time. I hate to, speak and run, but I have a water taxi to catch. So thanks again.
Thank you, Tawnya, appreciate it. Thank you. All right, next up, Dr. Bottaro, you want to speak from here? You're welcome to. Great. Your topic is CDMRP grant proposals, tips for the first-time applicants.
Right.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation from the organizers. I am not part of CDMRP, but I can provide you with an informed perspective. I was part of the programmatic panel of the inaugural year, 2017. And have been steadily a member of the programmatic panel until becoming chair in 21 and 22, and only recently stepped off for FY23. So I do understand how the program evolved, how it grew, and what its priorities are. And so I can help you understand that. The CDMRP was created in 1992. On this slide, we can cover just a little bit of who, what, why, where. The funding is meant to be provided for impactful research. It's to be conducted anywhere in the world at any institution. It's a two-tier review process. So it's different than NIH, and I'll point out those differences. It's a process that involves scientists, clinicians, and consumers, and I'll point out how much it involves consumers, because that's an important difference. Its reason to be is to accelerate impactful research and advance cures and improvements. And so the hallmarks, these are the distinguishing features of the KCRP as part of the CDMRP. So Congress adds targeted research funds to the DoD budget. There's an important difference there that I'll get to in another slide. It's added to the DoD budget. It's not part of the core DoD budget. So the hallmarks include the fact that all the research funds are specifically targeted by Congress. That's why it's called CD, so congressionally directed, and added to the DoD budget. So there's two budgets. There's the directed budget and the core budget, and I'll explain. And so they're added to the budget on a yearly basis. The CDMRP specifically targets research according to each program area and funds high impact, high risk, high gain projects that other agencies usually do not venture to fund. It's also important to note that CDMRP programs fund the full pipeline of research development from basic science through clinical trials as appropriate to the state of the development of each program. Consumer involvement is a CDMRP hallmark from the very beginning. It's the inclusion of patients, survivors, family members, and caregivers in the review process. Consumers serve as full voting members on nearly all CDMRP peer and programmatic review panels. Consumers are invited to participate on review panels based on their involvement in advocacy organizations, outreach and support organizations, or the armed forces, and their personal experience with the disease or the condition. Consumers add a unique perspective and a sense of urgency. And can I scroll the notes? Is that possible? I don't know if I can do that. Oh, you can. Can you scroll them? I'm relying on notes. I'm not a program officer, but I'm happy to do this. Can you scroll the one that's currently up? No. Oopsie. Well, if you can't, we can continue. Could you? No, I don't see any notes now. Sorry. Well, now it went back. Sorry, it just went. Oh, yeah, and it scrolled. Thank you. Okay. The CDMRP follows a two-tier review application process that was recommended by the National Academy of Medicine. There are no standing peer review panels. This is an important distinction again from NIH as far as funding agency. Consumers defined as individuals living with a disease, injury, or condition, or in some cases, their caretakers participate throughout the yearly program cycle. Each program's vision is adapted yearly. And I'll get to the importance of this, and award mechanisms are changed as needed to meet the current needs of the research community. The CDMRP does not use a pay line. This is important to understand. Applications that receive the highest scientific scores are not automatically funded. Applications are recommended for funding based on both their scientific merit and how well they address the programmatic criteria, and that's done in the programmatic panel review. Next, yeah. Okay. So I've covered some of this. This is the program life cycle. It starts with the stakeholder meeting, sets the vision. This can change yearly, although because the program's in its early stages of development, we haven't changed the vision because we believe it should be steady for a while so people understand the program and get used to it. Often there are pre-application screenings used to determine mechanisms to be used. And also to identify peer reviewers for scientific review. Then there's the peer review process, the programmatic review, and then there's funding recommendations, and finally the award execution. Consumer advocates participate in all of this process, and you can see how many are involved in the whole CDMRP program on the numbers on the right there. This is the FY23 CDMRP appropriations. You can see this is a significant research grant agency. It's $1.5 billion and growing. And so the kidney cancer program right now is $50 million. That's a significant number, but it can grow. And as Brian Lewis pointed out, the support from both scientists and advocates are what push that dollar amount up. If you look at some of the other dollar amounts in the other programs that have been in existence for a longer period of time, you can see that some of them are much higher. This one can be higher too, but it depends on like the number of applications and the quality of the applications. So let me see that. So this is congressional special interest funding versus DoD core funding. DoD core funding is something that is separate from the research budget. So the CDMRP's CSI funds are directed by Congress and appropriated through the DoD budget. They're obligated upfront, but there's no guarantee of out-year funding. The core funds are planned through specific budgeting processes and are appropriated yearly in response to the president's DoD budget requests. And projects can be incrementally funded in out years. The good thing about CSI funding is that being obligated upfront means that funding for a project is not impacted by future budget cuts. So if the DoD's budget is cut after you get an award, your award has already been made. It will be allocated incrementally over the period of service, but it will not be cut. Okay, this is the program cycle. And you can see here that it starts with the programmatic panel with the vision setting meeting. And that again, we've stuck to a core of vision, and I'll point that out in another slide. But the funding opportunities are released. There's pre-application receipt. In some cases, pre-applications are required. The pre-applications are screened, then reviewers are found. Again, there's no standing study sections. The applications come in, they get peer reviewed, they get programmatic review, and they get funding recommendations. This is a flexible program, and it can, whoops, did I do that? Oh, okay. Okay, I see the slide up there, but that's not what I see here. Okay. One more time. I'm sorry, I'm pausing, but okay. So let's just go to the next slide. Great. So Overall, the goal of the two-tier review process is to develop funding recommendations that balance the most meritorious science across many disciplines and offer the highest promise to fulfill the programmatic goals set forth in the relevant program announcements. And so to meet this goal, the CDMRP manages partnerships between these two review panels, and each panel has its own dedicated objectives and outcomes. Peer review is the first part. It follows a criteria-based process where applications are evaluated individually based on their scientific and technical merit by panels organized by scientific discipline and specialty area. Unlike other funding agencies, there are no standing reviews. Okay, these people are called in to review applications every year, and they're chosen based on the pre-application screening. So the outcomes from the peer review are scores and a summary statement. That's the summary statement is something similar to NIH, but it doesn't operate because there's no pay line. It doesn't have the impact it does on this review process. Can you scroll that notes section one more time? Oops. No. Sorry. Thank you. Scientific merit is only one of the criteria used by the programmatic panel when the programmatic panel meets to make final funding, the funding decisions. So the goal is to best meet the goals of the program, which are described in the announcement. So it's very important that you read the announcement carefully and that you tailor your application to the goals as outlined in the announcement. So that when considering applications, the programmatic panel turns to the summary statements and the associated scores from peer review, as well as the abstracts. Now, usually this is another difference. The programmatic panel does not see the full application in most cases. Okay, this is important. Please don't rely on the programmatic panel to be informed because you think they've read the whole application. They usually do not see the whole application. They see the abstract, the technical abstract, and the lay abstract. So it's important that you make your technical abstract clear and complete, because this does have an impact on what the programmatic panel uses to weigh the application, along with the summary statements from peer review. So in that process, in the programmatic review, we're comparing applications for their scoring, but we're also comparing applications as to how they fit the goals of the announcement for that year. So after the programmatic review, then the recommended list is generated and it's sent up the chain to the commanding general of the U.S. Army Medical Corps and the director of Defense Health Agency, Research Development and Acquisition Directorate for final approval. And it's a process that you're not involved in and the program officer is not even involved in. Okay, so vision setting, that first part of the program panel's job is to direct, the established congressional language for the overall program. It takes input and guidance from senior leaders and stakeholders. It takes into consideration the current research landscape, the clinical gaps, unmet needs, emerging technologies, areas with potentially high impact, as well as it tries to achieve a broad portfolio composition. You can see here that KCRP funding has gone up steadily. It started at 10 million in FY17. It's now at 50 million. And again, there's been a, this is a huge improvement due almost entirely to these advocacy organizations like Brian Lewis's, like Kidney Can and others. And it's very important that people take advantage of these opportunities, submit applications, because Congress does look at application numbers. It's not, it's only one criteria. But again, you can influence Congress and they can change this number. And there's a lot of room for this number to grow. This is the programmatic panel for FY23. Cheryl Walker is the new chair. You can see the other members of the panel. There's always one or two at least advocates on the panel. And Susan Poteet is from Kidney Can, and she's on the panel and has been for many years. Thank you, Susan. As others, okay. The vision and mission statements. These are important to understand as an applicant because although you will never say how your application fits these particular things, it has to be between the lines, okay? To eliminate kidney cancer through collaboration and discovery, this is important. Eliminate kidney cancer, okay? It's a high goal. To promote rigorous, innovative, high-impact kidney research, kidney cancer research for the benefit of service members. That's an important point. If you can benefit service members, please point that out in their application. Veterans, another important point, and the American public. These are things that you definitely have an opportunity to point out in your application text. The strategic goals, another thing that you must consider as an underlying important things for any application, regardless of its topic. Increasing the understanding of biology of kidney cancer, in encouraging innovative ideas that with high impact, developing novel therapeutic strategies for the treatment of kidney cancer, identifying new targets, developing pharmacological, immunological, genetic, microbiome, and other interventions, optimizing prognostic and predictive markers to assist in therapeutic decision-making, and repurposing existing or currently approved drugs for the treatment of kidney cancer. Improving the care of kidney cancer patients, integrating bench research with bedside care, and emphasizing translational research, investing in early career kidney cancer physicians. And again, I'm going to talk about clinical trials, applications, and postdoctoral applications with an emphasis. But I can tell you from the very beginning of the program in 2017, the one thing that everyone in the programmatic panel agreed on was that the two important things to grow in the new program was bring new people into the field of kidney cancer research by providing training from the postdoctoral level on, and two, start a clinical consortium and fund clinical trial awards that will build on the clinical consortium and incorporate these goals of collaboration between basic and translational scientists and clinicians. So again, grow the field and increase collaboration in the area of kidney cancer. So we want to invest in new people coming into the field, grow the field. And so those applications are very important and highly encouraged. So the focus areas, again, these are all on the CDMRP, KCRP website, but it's important that your application address one or more of these. And if you want to write it in the application that these are the ones you're addressing, do that. Okay, conduct basic biology to better understand etiology and cancer progression, metastatic disease, and resistance, genetic and environmental risk factors, and the prevention of kidney cancer. That's very important. And we don't get a lot of applications for that, but we look for applications for that. Identify and develop new strategies for screening, early stage detection, accurate diagnosis and prognosis, prediction, including biomarkers and imaging and treatment of early stage cancers. Again, an area that we feel is underserved. We want to encourage a lot of applications in that area. Develop the biology of rare kidney cancers and develop treatments to improve outcomes and reduce death. This is a very important area, not just to leverage what you learn from rare kidney cancers to a greater, broader kidney cancer population, but also to contribute to the biology of what's known, and so that others can use that for identifying new targets and strategies. And of course, novel therapeutic strategies and treatments, to drug targets, therapeutic modalities, treatment combinations, drug delivery systems. Identify and implement strategies to improve the quality of life and survivorship of patients. This is very, very important to the program. And again, it seems it's underserved by other agencies, and we have a big emphasis on this. Identify and implement strategies to mitigate health disparities, such as access to healthcare, social and cultural factors, environmental factors, and biological contributors. Again, an important area where the CDMRP places an emphasis, but a lot of other major funding agencies don't. Increase research capability through support and development of research conducted by next generation of cancer researchers. Again, this is trying to grow the field by bringing new individuals and also new technologies, individuals that work in other fields that practice a technology that's not being used in kidney cancer research and bring it into kidney cancer research. So these are the funding opportunities mechanisms that are now in place for FY23. The Academy of Kidney Cancer Scholars, again, an effort to grow the field, Clinical Trial Award, Concept Award, Idea Development Award, Nurse Initiated Research Award, Postdoctoral and Clinical Fellowship Award, Translational Research Partnership, and the Clinical Trial Consortium. It says here that the Clinical Trial Consortium is going to be released in early July. It's been released, and you can find it at the website that's listed below. The two mechanisms that are in red are ones I want to emphasize in this talk. So I'm going to show you a slide for every single mechanism here, but I'm not going to talk about several of them because I'm going to emphasize these two. But because this talk is recorded, people can look later at the slides because they have key information about those other mechanisms. So they're going to be in there. Don't get nervous if I skip them. I'm skipping this, but I'm going to leave this here for a moment so that people can pause when they go back to look at the recording. Okay, the Clinical Trial Award. This was one of the areas of emphasis. This supports the rapid implementation of early phase clinical trials, phase 0, phase 1 and 2, with the potential to have significant impact on the treatment or management of kidney cancers. Clinical trials may be designed to evaluate promising new products, pharmacological agents, drugs or biologics, devices, surgical procedures, behavior modifications, clinical guidance, and or emerging approaches and technologies. Therapeutic approaches testing existing interventions for new indications in kidney cancer are also encouraged. It is anticipated that outcomes from these studies funded by this award will provide the scientific rationale for subsequent development of larger efficacy-based clinical trials of interventions that will transform patient care. If you can scroll that note again, thank you. Scrolling. My seconds are ticking. Yeah.
So, at what stage can the trial be at for development? I mean, clearly, I will have a concept that will illustrate here. But if we have a study that's kind of ready to go, protocol written, but no funding in place, is that something that we can apply for funding for through this mechanism?
Yes, it's actually quite important that you at least identify where in the process of approval, in other words, if it's going to an IRB, okay. You have to identify who's going to take it through the IRB. Okay. Okay, so in other words, there has to be a protocol, and it has to be, there has to be a route for it to go through an IRB for approval.
The other thing I want to say, Monty, the other thing I want to say, what they look, if we have a trial and we get the part of the NeoVax, this is very expensive. I mean, Wayne will tell you, I mean, couldn't get some of the correlative funded, is the study has to be open, and the program officer, I think, check on cancer.gov if it's open at that time. So the study has to be at least activated in a public, domain before the money comes in. David, remember, like for the Clinical Trial Award and all these, the study has to be activated in a public domain.
Well, that was the translational research partnership.
And I think for the clinical trials too.
I don't think so, but the person to answer that is not me, and it's Teresa Miller, who's the program officer for for the KCRP, and that's the person who you really want to address that question to. I don't think that's so.
I see that you request the IND approval, and usually by that point you have a protocol written.
Right. You need a protocol written for sure,
yeah,
and you have to have it. Like you have to identify an IRB that is going to review that. Okay, it doesn't have to have been approved at the time of application.
Yeah, the problem sometimes you cannot put a protocol in at your institution before having a budget and having where the money come from and letters. That also sometimes is a problem depending on the institution. But
yeah. Okay, I have more to say on that, but if you.
I've had a couple of these conversations explanation about this award. If we hear something is a barrier in the way that mechanism is written, it can go back to the DoD for us to look and see if it needs to be revised to meet what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
It takes a year or two, but if you're seeing that it's not workable in the clinic, they need to know that.
Okay.
Right. Thanks, Susan. So preliminary data relevant to the proposal is required. There has to be obvious significant potential impact.
No, it will come.
Okay, great. It must be based on sound scientific rationale. It has to have access to a suitable population. It has to demonstrate a documented availability and access to the drug and compound or device or the other materials that are required to conduct the study for the duration of the study. It must reflect the study team's experience interacting with the FDA. It statistical analysis plan and appropriate statistical expertise. It has to have a power analysis reflecting sample size projections that will answer the objectives of the study. There has to be a clearly articulated data management plan, a clearly articulated safety management plan. You have to identify who will guide the protocol through the local IRB of record and any other federal agency or regulatory approval process. It should include also a transition plan, including potential funding sources if that's necessary. Okay, I'm concept of what I'm not speaking about. Idea development, not this one, but this one. So again, this is a very important award in terms of building the field. Its intent is to support recent doctoral and medical school graduates in the pursuit of innovative high impact kidney cancer research during their postdoctoral clinical fellowship. It allows them to obtain necessary experience for independent career as a leader in kidney cancer research. The maximum direct cost is listed there on the left. It's $195,000. The maximum period of performance is 3 years. Preliminary data are required, but they don't need to be in kidney cancer. So you can be a person transitioning to become a kidney cancer research from another field, or the data could be from another field because there was an opportunity to obtain relevant data in that field and not in kidney cancer. Clinical trials are not allowed in this mechanism.
Can I ask the same question as Tawnya?
Yeah.
Previous section. So again, Tony and I have these terrific postdoctoral fellows who come and spend 3 years with us.
Yeah.
They apply for this within their first year. Could this be used to fund their subsequent time with us?
So they have to have 4 years or less of postdoctoral or mentored clinical research training.
So
Okay.
we have folks that came, and yes, they can apply. It's a great
Yes.
mechanism. We try.
So in other words, yes, if they've done 3 years, then they can still apply to it.
Yeah. And after a year you can, but they have to be ready, hit the ground running. There are the concept award. They're very competitive.
Yeah.
Much easier than in K. Everything is, but
there has to be a demonstrated strong commitment to an independent career as a leader, in kidney cancer research. There has to be at least one mentor who's an established kidney cancer researcher. The research project, the experimental strategies may be novel or may be based on a strong rationale that's derived from published data or preliminary data that's provided in the application. The research development plan and environment have to show a capacity for innovative research and potentially the capacity to introduce a new paradigm, challenge existing paradigms, or look at existing problems from new perspectives. The proposed research project should enter to address a critical area in a question, a key question in kidney cancer research or clinical care. Okay. I'm not talking about that one or that one. There's a webinar series for funding opportunities. You're very highly encouraged to attend the webinars because you can ask questions in the webinars during the chat, and you can get those answered by people who are authorities in the program. And they cover several topics, and those are listed there. So again, strategies for success, relevance, impact, innovation, feasibility. Feasibility is very important, but again, this programmatic panel doesn't see the whole application. So you have to give some indication of feasibility in the abstract. And you may even say, this is why it's feasible. So obviously, pretty much for any agency, planning is important. There are deadlines that come up. If you need regulatory approvals, you have to start early. If it's a multi-organizational effort, you have to have a clear plan for coordination and communication. And if there's DoD collaborations involved, you have to understand that sometimes there's rules from those DoD organizations that may impact this application. Grantsmanship, this is obvious stuff. Clarity, unburdened by jargon. You have to understand that audiences, there's different audiences in peer review from other organizations, and you have to communicate your ideas clearly. You're encouraged to review the applications carefully before you submit and enlist experienced colleagues to give you help. And finally, the DoD is probably even less forgiving than NIH when you break one of their rules about applications. So don't do that. If they say no preliminary data, don't put preliminary data in there. Don't even refer to preliminary data. Okay. And there are mechanisms that have that problem, have that requirement. So finally, okay, we've already addressed some questions, but this is very important. What's here is that little the URL is very important, as is Teresa Miller and Teresa Miller's email address. Don't email me. It's teresa.j.miller.civ for civilian @health.mil for military. So I'm happy to answer some of the questions that you might have on some of the other mechanisms. But again, we're emphasizing the two that I outlined.
I think one thing is if you look at the OD, it's, it's government, but on steroids. So if you look at the application, it's hundreds, not the application, actually the announcement and it's hundreds of pages. It covered everything. Every question you could dream about in your wildest dream is answered this. So once you start reading it, the first time it went, and I was like, there is no way, like, how's that possible? I was overwhelmed. But actually, when you look at the webinar, have those slides, etc., and do your first grant, everything else become, way easier. It's the same thing. I don't know if Maxine, Maxine is a recent awardee in the academy. There is a significant amount of paperwork. No doubt.
Yes,
but actually, it's not. After a while, it becomes mundane.
Yeah,
there's a learning curve.
Yeah. There is a lot of paperwork, but it's not to the point that it's not nothing that nobody cannot do. It's very workable, and it's very helpful, the opportunities that we can get for funding. So I think it's in everyone's interest to look into it, and everything else is pretty straightforward after.
I wanted to add a couple of things for the people in the room. July 20th for two of the mechanisms, the pre-admission, the pre-application.
The pre-application
letter.
is due.
And I know one of them is concept, and do you remember what the other one is?
Hold on, let me go.
Post-op. So that's important
Yeah.
for the folks in this room. And I think it's also worth mentioning that institutions outside of the US can apply, and the industry.
And the pre-application, to my knowledge, includes letters of recommendation. So this is, in some cases, this is really important to, people can't be asked to give a letter of recommendation, today. So you really have to plan and give the people who are writing you a recommendation time to get that prepared. So pay attention to the deadlines for these things, even the pre-application. It's not long, but you may need the letters of application for it.
And internal deadlines. So the deadline may be, let's say, July 31st, but a lot of your institutions have an internal deadline that is,
Right.
1 week, 2 weeks, or like our place, 3 weeks earlier. Otherwise, they won't send it. Because, you know, some folks, you know, if you're gonna write your grant at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., you can't expect other folks to get you your work at 9 p.m. So you have to be very important, and internal deadlines are getting more and more now mainstream, right, Josh? 2 weeks at Wisconsin.
Dangerous, Tony. Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. And some of these, let me just add to that, some of these, you can start this process online and then refer your business office to the online application so that they just, you know, follow through from your start, as opposed to, you know, doing it in a PDF or something like that and then handing it to them, because that's much more work.
I have 2 days at the University of Wisconsin, so
2 days only?
2 days.
And they were, wow, we have 2 weeks? 3 weeks.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yes, those are local institutional deadlines. So your local deadlines count.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? No, well, thank you again, and keep the applications coming.
Great, thank you, Donna. Appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, yes, great. Thank you very much. All right. Well, best for last, maybe. Here comes from ARPA-H. I'm happy to introduce Darshak Sanghavi. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you hanging out with us on a Friday afternoon. Could you, I'm sure going to give just a little bit of a background. I know Tawnya gave a little bit, but if you could as well. Great, thank you.
So, hi, Rick. I'm Darshak Sanghavi. I'm one of the program managers at ARPA-H, and as you heard, this will be something completely different, by the way, because ARPA-H is looking for, and our funding mechanisms are very, very unusual compared to the way things happen. So I just want to give a little bit of context. I'll talk about myself very briefly. I am one of the first program managers here at ARPA-H, and this is a little bit of a sales pitch. I think if you sort of get a sense of how ARPA-H works, I believe you'll find that it is incredibly appealing to some of you, particularly those of you that are extremely innovative thinkers and have very big ideas. And the processes for applying for money from ARPA-H are very different than almost any other agency. It's far more, it's actually, we're really just interested in hearing the ideas, and the process for applying is actually quite easy. So I'm going to talk about how that works. So a little bit about, actually, I'll tell you a little about myself. So I actually live in the area here in Coolidge Corner. I'm a pediatric cardiologist, was chair of pediatric cardiology at UMass. I still see patients there. And my background is I spent a lot of time in public health. So I'm not a benchtop researcher, although I did spend some time in the lab, but mostly in public health and population health. Joined the Obama administration for several years, where helped think about how to pay for care in more efficient ways. And then was chief medical officer at Optum and then United Healthcare before working on digital health internationally. So the ARPA-H in general also focuses on bringing in people of interesting and diverse backgrounds. I actually was a journalist for a while, as a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine, used to be on the Today Show and did some other work as well. So a little bit about, just talks a little about, gives a little bit of sense of who comes into ARPA-H. So ARPA-H is about a year old, part of the Recovery Act. And the thinking here, so I think somebody referred to ARPA or DARPA before, stood for the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Some of you are probably familiar with this. So back almost 50 years ago, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, there was a significant amount of anxiety on the part of the US that we were not keeping up with applied research and technology. And so this new agency was created called ARPA-H, ARPA. And they brought in program managers. There's about 100 of them there, and they were given very wide latitude to invest in and pursue ideas that were really kind of moonshots. And so out of the work at ARPA came the protocols that became TCP/IP, that are the internet today, liquid crystal displays, self-driving cars, Roomba. So there's the idea of using this type of more focused applied research several years ago has actually gotten a little more purchased. So meaning there's ARPA or DARPA, which is primarily in defense. There's an ARPA-E in the Department of Energy. There's an ARPA for the Department of Homeland Security, and one that also works in the nation's intelligence services. about a year ago, as part of the Recovery Act, it said President Biden's vision was to create ARPA-H. And you can sort of see what it says there, but I kind of like this is sort of what attracted me when I came over. It's to pursue ideas that break the mold on how we normally support fundamental research and commercial products in this country. And ideas so audacious that they might work if only we'd try. So our budget is $2.5 billion this year has been appropriated. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're trying to use that money and how some of you, if you're interested, could perhaps tap into it. So the idea of ARPA-H is to accelerate better health outcomes for everyone. And the way we're structured is we actually are separate from NIH. We report directly to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. We do not have study sections. ARPA-H funding decisions are made essentially, we're very flat. There's a total of 3 layers between our director and our staff. So the program decisions are made very efficiently, very quickly. Typically, I'll talk about the timelines in just a minute, but to give you a little bit of sense, anyway, you get a sense of how that's sort of structured. By the way, these slides can all be public. So if you are interested in seeing them, we can send you a copy, or if you go to our website, arpa-h.gov, everything is on there. And then the website's pretty easy to navigate. But real quick, so ARPA-H, you can sort of, I'm not going to read the screen, you can see what it says there. But the idea is that we're looking for nimble, quick, and essentially decisive decisions around healthcare. And what we're interested in is ideas that are different or things that wouldn't necessarily be obvious to many people here. We call them sort of moonshots, or if you want to take big risks. So you can think about in your world what those ideas are. Are you one of those people that has an idea which is particularly challenging, or it's very hard to get funded through an organization where people sort of think in the conventional ways? You've got an idea that's very, very different. This is the place you want to sort of pitch that. There's a whole ecosystem around the way we think about ARPA-H. And here's stuff we're looking for in our applications. Radical change, and in return, we give you a ton of autonomy. So I want to talk about the role we have here. So there's 2 ways to engage with us. Well, there's many, but I'm just going to spend time on 2 of them. The first is you can apply to be a program manager. That's sort of the role I have. A program manager is term limited. You're given a 3-year term, renewable for 1 3-year term, so a total of 6 years. What's exciting about that is that we want to attract people that are particularly talented. And so our hiring and salary provisions are different than typical in government. You can be paid up to as much as the president is paid. Our hiring practices are also entirely different, so you don't go through conventional federal hiring authorities. So what that means, and I'll talk about what it means to be a program manager, but then you are charged with actually developing a program. What a program is, it's an idea you've pitched that the leadership team is bought in on. You develop that, and you're given a budget of typically $150 to $200 million to develop and execute an idea on the behalf of the American people. You're given extremely wide latitude in how to use that funding in the service of a particular vision that you have. I just want to put out there, that is pretty amazing. The application process for that, which I'll talk about in just a minute, is also something which is very, very different than what many of you may be used to. So anyway, there's the program manager flywheel here. I talked about a little bit about what that was, and this is sort of the template for what we're looking for. You essentially come in and you are the CEO of your idea. We have different sort of molds of what program managers can look like. We look for people early in their career, rookies, could be people late in their career. If you're already a member of the National Academy of Medicine, we look at everything in between. It's just somebody who has a vision and the ability to execute. What does the application process look like? Well, I'll talk about that a little bit. So we have these questions. We call them the Heilmeier questions. There's 10 of them on there, pretty straightforward. Our application process is 3 pages. So you fill that out. You answer the questions to the best of your ability, pitch your idea, and you send it in. It is different, isn't it? Well, I'll give you a little bit of a sense. So it's not like we suddenly send you a check for $150 million after you send a 3-pager, but I just want to give a sense of what that looks like. So it's not just talk, it truly is a different way of thinking about taking bets on people. So what that means is you send in your 3-pager. The 3-pager then is reviewed by a team of people that are pretty sharp. If it works, they would reach out to you. You'd go back and forth a little bit to sort of refine those ideas and give a little bit of additional context. If that is seen as a promising potential program or to be a program manager, you are called back to give a job talk, which is approximately 90 minutes to 2 hours long, where again, it's a pretty intense process, but you come in and you lay out your ideas in a lot more detail. At that point, there is a decision made by the leadership team of ARPA-H of whether you're brought in. That is the application process. If you succeed with that application process and you're brought in, you then are given roughly 2 to 3 months to actually then develop your program idea and the concept. That program idea comes to the leadership team of ARPA-H. I am a member of that leadership team, and we green light it. And if that happens, that is when the budget is released. We have approved 2 programs thus far. ARPA-H is very new, so we're still learning along the way. But that is the idea. The first program is around orthopedics and regeneration of joints. It is to create and deploy a single injection that helps regrow cartilage and bone in order to avoid joint degeneration. The second program that has been approved thus far is one related to better visualization intraoperatively of tumors in ways so that surgeons can better resect areas for appropriate margins and also protect areas from injury. Gives a little bit of sense of the kind of stuff we're interested in. The program I'm working on has not yet been announced, but I'm completely different. I'm not a biopharmacist or a benchtop researcher, but I'm particularly interested in changing underlying fundamental incentives in American healthcare payment to focus more on prevention. So we span a wide variety of ideas that we hope are transformative and are high risk. You can, again, you can see all the slides, but hopefully what I've described, that's the basic concept there. At ARPA-H, we do not perform our research actually in-house. So as a program manager, if you come in, you hire a team. Typically, it's matrixed across a number of consultants and other organizations. And then if you were to think about it, how is ARPA-H different than, say, NIH or other organizations? It's in 2 ways. The first is that ARPA-H projects, if you were to be a program manager, they are not, the balance of where the idea comes from, in NIH and other places, it's investigator initiated. The people come to NIH with the idea, they say yes or no, we like it, and they disperse the grant to you. It's different. ARPA-H, that polarity is reversed. The ideas are generated or the concepts are generated primarily by the program managers. The second piece is that the grants and the money that are dispersed, there are specific outcomes that have to be achieved by the performers that you as a program manager bring in. It's applied research with the specific fact that there would be accountability to actually execute on what has been proposed. And success at ARPA-H doesn't always mean that your program achieves exactly what you should, but it's that the hypothesis is appropriately tested. So if you fail for the right reasons. Again, you can look at the support evaluation models. What's very important to us is also transitioning the work that's been done so that it is of use much more broadly. We have a whole team that focuses on pathways to commercialization, venture capital investment to ensure that ARPA-H ideas find purchase with the broader community and public. These are our focus initial mission areas. Again, I would encourage you, if you're interested in learning about where we focus, to take a look at our website or these kinds of slides. These are all public, but these are all areas that we're investing in now. I also want to give a sense of sort of where, before I move on to the next, with program managers. I mentioned DARPA has a total of 100 program managers that are operating currently. That's at the Department of Defense. ARPA-H is new. I am the first physician program manager, and I was number 5. We are on track to hopefully get 20 program managers this year. So that's sort of what our pipeline looks like. But again, with the eye towards staffing up to 100. So this is the birth of a new federal agency. You don't get to see that a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I also am particularly excited about ARPA-H. I also was one of the founding members of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, completely on the different side, on the payer side, but also seeing that it's an exciting time because researchers, clinicians, or anybody who has a really creative idea, being there at the birth of a new agency gives you an enormous capacity to do good and have influence on the health and the practices of what we actually accomplish as a nation. So I'll just briefly touch on the next way one can engage. So I talked about becoming a program manager, and if that's sort of something that excites you, I'd encourage you to apply. And as I said, the process is we try to have a wide open funnel. The other way one can engage is through what we call the broad agency announcement, the BAA. We have an open BAA for ideas that are particularly promising. So the open BAA, similar to the program manager, this is not applicants applying to be a program manager, but rather you believe that your idea is worthy of ARPA-H funding. The good news about the open BAA, you can look at the award types and the timeline, but I want to emphasize again here, the open BAA application is 3 pages. So if you can articulate your idea that quickly, that also then gets reviewed within a few weeks. The program managers and our technical experts review those. If the BAA is felt to be promising, we then invite you to submit a full and formal application, a totally different process than is typically available. Those grants can range anywhere from a few million to up to $20-some million for support. So that's our open BAA that is currently open. Our website accepts those applications on a rolling basis. And then I don't know if, we just have about 5 minutes left. There's a lot of text on these slides. You all know how to read, so I'll leave them open and they're available to all of you. I'm sure it's fine if we distribute them, but there's a fair amount of good information on these slides about the various additional details about ARPA-H's operating model. Yeah, so ARPA-H has so we're so early now that the funds have been obligated, but they haven't actually yet been awarded. We have a number of commitments that have been made, and those will be announced in the near future. But the awards typically, as I said, would be around what we consider more innovative or radical approaches. Things that go for curative therapies or entirely new ways of framing programs or problems.
So refreshing to see. I mean, kidney cancer, let me tell you why you should not fund us in a way. No, but kidney cancer is one cancer. It's, top 10, but it's not as common as prostate or breast cancer. But what could we do to have something kidney cancer specific, knowing the ideas certainly are transformative, are big, maybe at the level of the, all cancers perhaps, or survivorship from kidney cancer. I know you may not know it, but at the same time would love maybe kidney cancer to be the starter, disease in cancer.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I should have specified one thing, which is our funding model, if you read through the materials, we're trying not to fund a single, we're not focused on like one disease. So in other words, our job or our applications are not, we only want to do lung cancer or breast cancer, or for that matter, kidney cancer, but rather things that are platform technologies or new ways of handling a condition or thinking about it. Now, it can be through the lens of kidney cancer or through kidney, but the vision should be as part of the way it's presented to us, that we should be able to draw a line between that and something that's more transformative and more platform oriented.
Can I ask a related question? Over here.
Yeah.
Hello.
This is working.
You could just yell.
In the absence of a program manager, when you apply under the BAA, who sort of makes the decision if there's not a program manager that has the vision of what you're trying to sort of
Yeah, great.
go on?
Yep. So the question was, well, if you were to put in a BAA, how does the person on the other side know what on earth you're talking about, essentially, and how can they evaluate you appropriately? So two ways. The first is that even if we don't have a program manager assigned to it, we actually have a number of we call CETAs, or they're science and technical experts in many, many areas that are affiliated with ARPA-H. So typically they're going to be reviewed by at least two individuals like that, and then also assigned to a program manager. One of the things that's very important for an ARPA project is also the ability to communicate your idea in a way that also, you can make the case of somebody who's an extremely educated person that may not be an expert in your very particular area. And we look for that very carefully. So that's also part of what we're trying to do there. Great question. Yeah.
Something like this, which is obviously a big commitment from ARPA-H, and it's a short application. How much does sort of seniority play a role? Meaning someone who's just starting off as an independent career versus someone who has decades of experience. I imagine there might be a leaning towards one, but maybe you could speak a little bit on that.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you, and honestly, where do you think the best ideas come from?
I mean, I'm biased.
Not the senior people.
Yeah.
Not me.
I'll say that that's sort of the really nice thing about this program is that we're really just interested in the quality of the idea. While seniority is important because experience makes is certainly worth something, that's not really determinative of how we fund. And as we sort of look through our pipeline, we'll be releasing, and one can look at the kinds of programs that we fund as well. I think this is like the promise and the peril of a new agency is that we're sort of learning as we go. We believe that this is additive and supplemental to the kind of work that NIH does. I mean, NIH does incredible work. CDC does incredible work. This is just, we want to make sure that we are trying other ways of also innovating. So this is to some extent a grand experiment in seeing if this way of funding research federally is also helpful. Yeah.
Will it support clinical trials on breakthrough sort of technologies and sort of new platforms?
Yeah. So one of the criteria that we would use is would the project that's proposed be funded through some other mechanism if we didn't exist? That's like a pretty basic question we ask. So if it's an incredibly commercially viable product that's gotten through that could be funded through some other way, that's probably not the best ARPA-H grant. On the other hand, if the project or the trial is something which is particularly innovative and we believe wouldn't be funded some other way, that could be a good target for us. Yeah.
What about small businesses? Can small businesses apply for grants?
Yes. We are agnostic to the affiliation of the individual who applies. So one can be part of it can be from almost anywhere.
So I don't know if you have more slides to get through over here.
Yeah, well, there's a million slides, but I think we can just talk.
Well, I was going to ask actually, so what does that contact and application process looks like in terms of getting that initial step in the door?
Yeah, so it's all on the website. And it's actually, so as I said, ARPA-H.gov. You'll see it's pretty easy to navigate. 2 clicks and you'll be there. Yeah. And what I'll say is on the slides here as well, we have, there are active links around here. You could learn about our evaluation criteria and all that jazz here. And we have some FAQs as well too. So I'd encourage us, if people are interested, you can email your questions in if you like. We're always there. Takes a little while. Yeah.
You applied online
I did.
and someone from ARPA-H reached out and said, you made it through the first level of your application and come on in.
That is exactly what happened.
And then you went in 90 minutes, you sort of gave your TED Talk pitch of what you wanted to do.
Correct.
And how was the panel of like this? Who were you in front of?
I'm sorry?
Who were
Oh,
you
who
in
was I
front?
in front of?
Who did you
Yeah.
interview with?
Yeah, so there's about 50 to 60 people that are part of the pitch panel one listens to. And depending on so as I said, hopefully I'm not making it oversimplified. The 3 pages, there was a couple of phone calls initially to talk through, a couple of pre-interviews. They needed me to clarify the idea, what are you doing, why? So we went through that. That took several weeks. It was after that the in-person interview was scheduled. Even that, and that's invited, you're assigned like a coach and another individual who then help you make sure that you're prepared for that time. So there is a bit of a process. It takes a few months to get through it. And then the presentation is done to a collaboration of ARPA individuals and then individuals in government or externally who are particularly expert in that area would be invited to also listen to the pitch. The decision to accept a program manager, though, is done solely by the ARPA-H leadership team.
And will you be working from here in Coolidge Corner, or are you going to DC or?
Yeah, so we're a national program, so one can work remotely. We have program managers all over the country. ARPA-H will likely have ultimately 3 physical sites nationally. One of them will be in the Washington, DC area, so that's where we go. My particular program is focused a lot on public health, and there's a lot of complexity there. So as with many things, the idea is only about 20 to 30% of success. It's in making the relationships and trusted contacts with other individuals in the government and beyond that is also really critical in making sure the success happens. So I am in Washington a day or two every week or every other week. Other program managers that are particularly much more on the technical side or biopharma side, they'll come in once a month for a few days. Big picture, we have a number of models, so one does not have to move. A program manager job, though, just to be clear, it is full-time. The BAA, on the other hand, that is obviously like research or support for your program, and you remain at whatever institution you're at when you apply. Again, the FAQ has details on all of these areas, so I'd encourage you if this is something that appeals to you to look at that.
So program manager is full-time, but you may not have to leave where you live, but then 3 renewed by 3.
Correct.
And after that, how can you go back to the workforce? So you're asking someone that after 3 years, maybe 6, but 3 years, you won't have a job.
Yes.
Okay. And will that depend on the administration? Currently, the administration, by then tomorrow, a different administration, would they cut the program? No, this is established, but they may change everybody.
Correct.
Okay.
It's one of those things.
No,
life
perfect.
is you sort of
Yeah,
life
yeah,
is
yeah.
uncertain.
Yeah. That's why it's hard, I would say, and this is, I'm trying to be philosophical. Maybe you'll attract the very senior people that they've done it and now they want to serve, or the very junior people that have all the bright ideas that
Right.
want to start like that. And
Yeah.
the folks in the middle, unless they're millionaires on the side, they probably won't because they need the paycheck. Is
Yeah.
that assessment somewhat correct or too philosophical?
That is certainly a theoretical risk. We found that one of the things we're enriching for are people who are risk takers, who actually are willing to make that commitment. You can see, yes, there's all the challenges you talked about, but think about this is an opportunity which is unusual and is difficult to imagine one could get this degree of autonomy somewhere else. That appeals to a wide variety of person, and some of them may be as successful as program
And it's an
managers.
honor to serve. I mean,
Correct.
that's the other thing.
It's one of the reasons I came. I left our
Absolutely.
company. We took public 2 years ago. I left that because of public service and this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I think that, so for those of you who really are feeling that urge, it's really an extraordinary opportunity.
Yep.
So one more question here, and maybe this is actually a question for this audience as well. At a high level, it's about your interactions with ARPA-H across other governmental agencies. And I'm going to specifically ask about cooperative groups. So we have these large, effective clinical trial cooperative groups that conduct studies in, frankly, what I think is a very sequential manner. Drug works for a small group of patients in late stage settings. So we're going to start slowly working our way back.
Yeah.
And we have examples of that all over the place, where the most effective use of a therapy was actually for patients with either a newly diagnosed or second line therapy, where we get years of benefit versus months of benefit.
Yeah.
But that sequential process means that there are thousands and thousands of human life years that are lost because of that.
Yes.
So does ARPA-H, especially for folks who have innovative technological approaches that could flatten that curve, how best, or can ARPA-H facilitate that interaction to change that paradigm, either within the cooperative group structure that currently exists, or is it something that a proposal would have to come in to really take things in a different direction? And I've got some ideas around that, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising an incredibly complex topic. And what I would say to that is, honestly, I don't think ARPA-H has a solution or a view on that particular issue. However, what you just laid out is a problem which may be worthy of ARPA-H investment to figure that out, which is the problem you're identifying is this sort of approach to a very incremental approach to the use of these medications, largely because of the way risk may be thought about in pharmaceutical trials. And then there's all the other things that play into it, patent exclusivity and all that. And I'm sure we could sort of tick down that list. But I would say that's the kind of thing that could be a project we would be interested in exploring.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. That was.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time.